Hey everyone, it's Jim
and Charles
from Melatonin Amps, and in this episode we're going to prep the R-Core transformer and get it installed on the top plate. But let's just take a look here. If you're in the low voltage region, you're actually in the previous episode, so go there. This episode is specifically for everybody who has high AC mains voltage, 220 to 240 volts AC. And here is your primary wiring diagram. It's fairly straightforward. The red wire is going to be the hot connection to the IEC. The gray wire will be the neutral connection. And we're going to butt splice the black and orange wire together. And it's going to be easy peasy. So let's just get to it. Okay, so the first part is we need to make a butt splice on the black and orange wire. Now don't make a mistake. Caution everyone, the orange and red wires are easy to make a mistake. So identify the red wire and the gray wire and sort of put it aside. Find your orange and black wire, and I'll show you how to determine the rough length. This is not rocket science. It's a non-critical dimension, but that wire is going to come through the top plate roughly here, and it's going to be buried in shrink. So let's make it about this long. See how I did that? And cut them off parallel. Be brave. This needs to be done. It's always good to have extra bits of wire, so if you don't have a nice little tub or a jar of extra wire length, toss it in there and keep it. You never know when that'll be useful. Now the reason why we're going to make this butt splice a little long is because if at some point in the distant future somebody wants to salvage this transformer for something else and they need to reconfigure the primary side, they'll have some extra wire. Okay.
Or if you're moving it from a high voltage to a low voltage region, you can actually convert your amp over.
Right, that's true. Okay, so let's do a little strip back. It's going to be a little longer than a normal strip because we want to make a good long butt splice. And as always, when you're stripping, make sure you don't come too tight so that you don't nick the wires. You can always go down a size on your stripper. Now, go ahead and get your soldering iron turned on. We're going to dial it in fairly cool for the butt splice. Let's try 340 C, which is about 640 Fahrenheit. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to put a twist on the wire. And then we need to twist the pair of wires together. Just like that. Now, because we're going to be doing some soldering, let's switch over to a heat-resistant surface, Charles. Just get that out of the road. And you're going to need a little tiny bit of no clean flux. And you probably can just dip it right in here. You don't want too much flux. Just get a little bit on there. That's all we need. Let's get that out of the road. Now I'm going to show you how to... We're almost tinning the wire, but it is a butt splice. Make sure the tip of your iron is nice and clean and tinned for this job. And then load it with a bit of solder. And go ahead and heat up from the bottom and fill in from the top and come back on top with that little bit of solder on your iron, and I'll show you what it looks like. And that's all there is to it. It doesn't take much. If you find that the solder is not taking well, it's probably because you're a little bit too hot or you didn't have any flux on the wire. The flux is absolutely critical. And now let's get a little bit of shrink and Charles has got some sitting around here somewhere. And let's just nip off the rough end here so it's clean and neat. And I think, Charles, we've got some small, do we have any? That should be just fine. We're just trying to think about what, so let's find out roughly what size. So a little bit less than an inch, a little bit less than 25 millimeters is going to be, it could be an inch or 25 millimeters, going to be just fine. Now, what you want to do is make sure that that butt splice is buried in the shrink. That's really important. So don't put it so far in that it doesn't cover up the shrink. So go ahead and shrink that on. Now, while it's still hot, you can just pinch off the end, just like that. And there you go. It's nice and safe now. Okay, now one important thing we need to do in prep is to put a good hard twist on the filament wires. And that's the pair of white wires that's here. So go ahead and get them out and get them all kind of neatenized and organized, nice and straight and parallel like this. Now the best way to make it a good twist, this will keep the electrical field at a minimum. It'll help cancel out the field, and it'll keep your preamp as low noise as possible. A bad twist on the heater filament can be a disaster in an amplifier, so pay attention. So grab a cordless drill. This is the best way to do it. Set it on a low speed and just chuck the end of the wire in carefully. Now we're going to be snipping off that end, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Now, pay attention. You have to support the wire where it goes into the transformer, so you're not driving the twist into the connection in the transformer, or you could damage the connection. So I've got my fingers here pinching the wire, and I'm just going to go in low and slow. See how I'm slowing down now? We're almost done. It's a really nice tight twist. And you see how it's starting to bunch up? That we're done. Don't go any further than that. If you do go a little further, you can ease off the bunch, but that's a perfect twist. And look what happened here. I was holding it, so the wire didn't twist up in here, and that is just perfect. Okay, so all I've done is taken the flat black heat shrink and cut it basically in half. So we need a length of about 2.5 inches or 65 millimeters for each side. So we're going to bundle the secondary side up and the primary side up, each in its own little bundle. So just go ahead and get the wires kind of organized a little bit so that they're a little neat. And we're going to open up the tube. A pencil is handy for this. Just like that. And you can just work the tube open a little bit. And let's get the heavier wires in first. There's no rules about how this goes in. You just want to have some protection for where the transformer wires will go through the top plate. And snug that up. So it should snug right up to where the transformer body is. And let's go ahead and get that shrunk. There. And on the primary side, we'll do exactly the same thing. Okay, so you see how the butt splice is going to get tucked in? So it's actually going to get double insulated. So there we go. I think you know what you're doing. Hop to it. Okay, so it's time to get the wire cut to length. So we're going to measure from the end of your shrink, and the red and the gray wire are both going to be the same length, which is going to be about 3.5 inches, which is about 90 millimeters. It's a non-critical dimension. You just want to be close, and the same length will work. And while we're at it, let's cut the transformer shield ground wire to about 1.5 inches, which is about 40 millimeters from the edge of the shrink. And set this aside because I think we're going to have a use for that later on. Okay. Now you're going to need to strip and get ready to put on a terminal. And what you want to do is, because we have a single wire and a fairly big barrel here, we're going to strip a double length plus a little bit. And that'll just give us a
Before you do that, though, you want to make sure you get your shrink and your boots on.
Oh, okay.
It's an easy thing to miss.
Thanks for keeping an eye on things, Charles. So the boots go on first. Put them all the way down. Then your shrink goes on. Okay, we actually had to stop and change up our heat shrink size. We're actually filming 2 different segments. One for the high voltage region, which is you, and one for the low voltage region. We had grabbed the wrong shrink. So you want actually the smallest white and red diameter shrink. Okay, let's get back on track here. So the white will go on the gray. What did I forget?
The boot.
I forgot the boot. Okay, on the boot goes first, and then on comes some white shrink. And over here on the red side, let's just get those on. Even though we haven't stripped the wire, we can go ahead and get everything loaded. And we're back on track. Okay, so let's load up the crimper. And let's just neatenize that wire a little bit. And in it goes. Now you want to make sure that your wire is poking through the barrel just a little tiny bit, because when you crimp, what happens is you actually tighten up that wire a little bit. And if you look at the crimp, you'll see we got a really nice crimp here, but back here it's loose. So the way to finish this off is just to move the crimper down a little bit and make a second crimp. And let's just test it. Oh, that's a beautiful crimp. Okay, I think you know what you're doing. We'll just slide some shrink on and heat it on. Okay, and I think you know what you're doing with the other side, so go ahead and get a crimp on the red wire. Okay, we're almost done the prep. We've got just a couple little jobs to do. One of them is, as soon as your heat shrink has thoroughly cooled, don't try this when it's hot. You can pull the boots on a little bit. Just line them up and just carefully slide them on. Just like that is good. That'll get them sort of lined up. And we've got to tin our little shield ground connection, or wire. So let's just strip it back a little bit. We're going to strip it back perhaps a tiny bit longer than we think we need, because we'll trim it to fit in just a minute. So let's just give it a little tiny bit of flux. Let's set our soldering iron fairly cool, 340 C, 640 Fahrenheit. And we're going to load the tip like this with a bit of solder. And we're just going to come over here and we're just going to just flow it out onto the wire. And that's all there is to it. That's how you tin a wire. Now, if the solder is not taking on the wire, it's probably because you're too hot. So just turn the iron down a little bit. Now, we're going to size it for the blue junction that it fits, and all these blue junctions come from the factory prepped in the wrong direction, so they're basically closed. So before you put these on the board, it's important to open them all up and basically prep. And this is something to keep an eye on every component you install. Sometimes you need to do a little preliminary work before you actually install it. So just back off the set screws, and a little awl really makes quick work of this, and just come in and push those receivers up so it's fully open now and ready to receive the wire. So let's just check the fit here, and it's a bit long. You see that? So in fact, it's even a bit too long, but that's fine because we can just nip off the extra bit, and there we go. Bob's your uncle. That's all done. And yeah, so let's get this transformer installed on the top plate. Well done, everyone.